So much. Well, thank you for being here for our June PH Mass monthly session on the architect's perspective on the Passive House process. We have an excellent panel put together for you tonight. You can see the speakers here. We're going to come back to that in just a moment. I'm going to actually have board member James Peterson here come up and introduce the panel. But right now, I want to do a few quick updates. So first of all, I want to thank MassSave, who is helping put on this event and a lot of our other training programs. For the past, going on almost 6 years now, they've been funding a Passive House incentive program, and now it's a Passive House and all electric homes incentive program. I'm sure many of you are aware of these already. So I'll go through them very quickly. Then these are the 1 to 4 unit incentives. Doesn't necessarily require Passive House, but it does require a HERS score to get you close to what Passive House achieves. These were meant to sort of tie into the new code updates. But those are 1 to 4 unit incentives, very, very successful. And these are the Passive House incentives. So again, 5 units or larger, you can get up to $3,000 per unit of incentives for a Passive House certified building, plus feasibility study, energy modeling costs. So a really great program. And I always encourage folks, just enroll early in the process. So if you have a new project, and how many developers or the owners we have in the room today, but you are very early stage, enroll as soon as you can to take advantage of some of the feasibility study incentives, for example. You get those right away. So I'm also admitting people here to the room on my phone. These are the current incentives. We're up to almost 14,000 units of housing enrolled in these incentive programs. It's a pretty incredible success story that we've seen. And this is only going to grow with the rollout of the new code. So how many folks in this room are familiar with the new code changes in Massachusetts? Okay, almost everyone. Excellent. Once again, you guys are the best audience here. Stretch code, Passive House is an optional pathway for all building types. Specialized opt-in code, Passive House is a requirement for every building 12,000 square feet or higher. Here's the updated map. This is always changing with new communities joining in, but all the sort of dark blue highlighted in yellow are the communities with this right now. So it includes Boston, a lot of others. But in these places, if you're building a new project that's 12,000 square feet or more multifamily, you're required to be Passive House. So next month, we're going to continue our sort of perspective on the Passive House process series, which is the engineer's perspective with James Peterson leading the show. He might give you a preview of that in a moment. Last month, we started this session with the developer's perspective on Passive House. That was recorded and is posted on our website. So if you guys missed it, you want to rewatch it, just go to phmass.org, click on our video library. You'll find the developer's perspective on the Passive House process. We also have this course coming up. So this event is next Tuesday, July 9th. The following day, right here in the same room, we're going to be putting on a multifamily PHI certified building verification requirements workshop. This was just announced. It's going to be in the morning from 8 to 12, so it's 4 hours. This is no cost, put through our partners at MassSave. But this is limited space, what we can fill here in this room, and a little bit less, so that we can have some discussion going on. So if you are interested in this, definitely sign up right away. You can find this on our website. It's an Eventbrite link, allows you to register. This is specifically focusing on the PHI certification platform. So anyone out there who's worked on PHI projects or may work on PHI projects in the future, this is geared towards you. So definitely take advantage of this. Then we're helping to promote this event, which is happening right through our BSA friends, the Northeast Embodied Carbon Summit. This is happening June 20th and 21st, so next week at the Federal Reserve, which is just down the street from here. But you can find out more about this. There's a link on our website. You can also find stuff from the BSA's website as well about this. Lastly, we have a great announcement. You may have seen this in our newsletter, but we're looking for a new education program director. We're hiring. Please. You, your friends, your colleagues, whoever you know, refer them to us if you think they make a great fit for this. The full description is right there, phmass.org, job openings. You can also just find the link from phmass.org. Definitely look it up. It's a full-time position. It can be remote-based, though you do have to make some events like these and others here in the Boston area. But overall, great position. We're looking to grow our team. Hopefully, we'll be adding to this in the future, too, with even more people. But definitely refer them to us. We want to find somebody good. All right. With that, I'm going to turn things over to our board member, James Peterson.
Thank you, Aaron.
To introduce today's session. So take it over.
So Aaron said everything I'm going to say. He just said it way too fast. And I think our panel is shy. Otherwise, they'd be sitting up here. Why don't you guys come on up so we can look at you for a few minutes? And then we'll get you talking. So, as Aaron mentioned, I'm a board member and I'm also, part of the monthly program committee that we have. So in our brainstorming, with, Passive House becoming a code compliance path, we wanted to come up with a program and ended up a series, to hopefully attract and educate, people new to Passive House because it's, a code at this point. So we started with owners and developers last month, and this month it's designers, and next month it's mechanical engineers. And then the month after that, it's construction professionals, and then measurement and verification. I call it measurement and verification. I guess it's verifiers. And we are looking for what would be the next appropriate, what would be the sixth or seventh in that chain of presentations that would help extend this series. If people have suggestions, we'd love to hear that. So I'm going to pass it over to Michelle, who's gonna take it from here. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, James. And it is awesome, actually, and perfect that you're introducing me because it's through mechanical engineering that I actually understood what I should be doing as an architect. I'm delighted to be here. I'm Michelle Apigian with Icon Architecture, and we are a women-owned Boston-based design firm focused on sustainable communities. We work at institutional scales. We do a lot of residential work, and my particular passion and area of focus is high-performance multifamily housing. And we've got 3 officially FIA certified Passive House projects. Thank you. And probably half dozen more that are winding their way through, and some of them may frankly not get there, right? So that's part of the conversation. But I'm so excited every day about what we can bring to the table, about how much agency we have, not just in the actual design, but in our conversations across the sectors with policy folks and municipalities and at every level, how we connect and how it takes a team, all these disciplines that we just walked through, the developers and the engineers and the verifiers, and right, it takes a team. So I'm super excited that we have entered an era where, of course, all the construction projects should be Passive House in New England anyway, let's just say, right? And as I thought about how to think through this panel, and I'm going to introduce them in just a moment, or let them introduce themselves, frankly. I was really thinking about how long our journey is. The developers have a very long journey, there's no doubt, longer than ours, but we have a long road, and it needs optimism and it needs hope, at every stretch, because ultimately everyone wants a Passive House certified building. That's the summit. That's what we're trying to achieve. And that could be 4 or 5 years out, and it will require hundreds of people to make it happen. And we may not actually achieve the summit. We might not get a view, but we might get darn close, right? We may need to turn back, and that still will not be for naught. And so I think what I wanted to really talk about today is, how do we plan for that awesome goal? How do we, what's that journey look like along the way? Because it is long. And then how do we actually close it out and reflect? And so with that, I'd like to introduce our panel. We've got Diane and we've got Andres, and I'm going to let each of them maybe just stand up. Okay, Andres.
I'm Andres Bernal. I am with JGE, or J. Garland Enterprises. We are a small minority-owned firm, so it's sort of in contrast. I think I felt like we were sort of the small guys here. We've been in business for about 5-6 years, and we've been focusing primarily in housing, and with that in affordable housing. So we've had sort of the privilege to do a lot of work in the world of passive house. So I'm excited to share my thoughts here, but I see a lot of people that really know what they're doing here, so we'll see if I have anything to share here.
All right, Diane.
So Diane Tufts, I'm Senior Associate and Sustainable Director at PCA Architects in Cambridge. So medium-sized firm and that we do planning, architecture and interiors. And with the recent past, it's been a lot of housing, a lot of multifamily housing. And so we've had the privilege of really delving into passive house, really using that as a way to inform a lot of our portfolio. And looking forward to sharing some perspective today.
Awesome. So my first question is gonna be two-part. The first part is what gets you psyched about passive house projects? And let's hope we're all excited because that's what we're doing now, right? So like, what does that mean? And I think on that topic, how has that maybe moved or changed your own internal processes as you plan for and think through that? And we'll start with you, Tanya.
Absolutely. So there's a lot that I actually. I think about it kind of in the 3 Ds, sort of, early design and then the technical thinking and applying that to making something that is actually real. And then the sort of what happens at the end of construction with the handover. And so with design, I get really excited with sort of the challenge that it brings in that, we shouldn't be thinking about design in the same way. It doesn't mean that it needs to be overly simplified or ugly, or it does we still bring that definition of what that building is in the end. And really think that it gives us an opportunity to sort of pause and rethink and not take the same approach that we always do. So, some of our buildings we really look at, especially, affordable buildings, and if we have a client who really wants to include, access to outdoor space in every single unit. So from an equity perspective, but balconies are really challenging in passive house. And so, using that as a guiding strategy from the very beginning and how you would not only achieve the look of the building, but also the constructability and the achievability through thermal bridging. As a design challenge that can be something that creates a different approach. And so I think that that's really informed our process, and allowed us to take a step back, and that we were seeing it along the way of just kind of this taking a step back and try to just being able to approach things with a slightly different lens and not keep trying to do the same thing because it's not going to achieve the same results. And we're trying to do something different here. And then I'm a big nerd, so I really love the building science part of it all, too.
Well, I was gonna say, like, and I'm gonna definitely move to you, but just building on that, I love that there's data to support the decisions that we make. And that we have that as a tool, as opposed to a gut vibe. I like that, I don't like that, right?
Yes.
So, I think to answer that question, I sort of go back to, how I practiced before. I guess I was taught completely involved with passive house and after, and I think what I like, and it sort of ties those two together, is really the process, how it's sort of completely changed in my mind, because I think previously I would say it was more of a spatial sort of question that I was sort of searching in spaces and, some visual sort of qualities, and then sort of when I started to look into passive house, it became really clear to me that we couldn't just do that. It had to, all the decisions had to be based on something else. So sure, there is sort of so now I was sort of being able to pick up some of the conceptual aspect of it that is trying to drive some decisions, but I'm also sort of taking on sort of the data and sort of the science of it and kind of try to merge those together. But I think that's sort of what became really critical, because I think if we sort of skip that step, it's just, you just can't catch up at the end. It just seems like we've been working on some design that it's sort of taken us in, in one direction. Some community members might be behind it, some owners and so forth. And then, we have our window wall ratio wrong or something like that. It's so hard to step back. So for me, it's sort of just being so aware from the beginning and designing with that in mind. And, I think it's a little bit more challenging, but it's also more fun. Just because, I think, I guess we just like challenges. So I think that's what I like. And I completely see my process completely change. At the early stages, it sort of changes also as it goes into documentation and for sure into construction. But the fun part, I think, and it's that, for me at least, that's at the beginning, and then we have to sort of make it happen.
So related to that, it is a big team. There are a lot of consultants, right, that are helpful. And some of the information that you're talking about, the feedback loop that you're looking for early when you're iterating, how are you going about that? Or how are you doing it internally? Are you advocating for the support? Like, how are you helping make sure that that's happening at the right time? Because that's.
Michelle, can I step that back?
Yeah.
One step back and ask,
Absolutely.
are you bringing Passive House to your developer clients, or are they know that they're bringing it to you? Who's informing who? And
Right.
ultimately, how do you keep the developer in the loop as to what this is going to mean for them?
Okay. I think I'll start with that.
Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
Well, I think, it's hard to, if we talk about it today is very different because, the code now,
Yeah.
now they're just looking at you kind of, their question is this the way to go? So, but if I take a step back a couple of years ago, it was more about sort of the educating of like, okay, here's what, you were trying to, I guess, convince the owner, the developer, that this makes sense for them. And so that sort of became, that was a big part of it. And then sort of this idea of reducing cost, energy usage and cost, particular in some of the work that we were doing in sort of workforce housing and affordable housing. I think that sort of, that resonated and was sort of something that owners really gravitated and sort of grabbed onto. I think on the market rate perspective, I don't have a lot of experience at the very large scale, but we were able to work in a sort of smaller scale where the owners were just invested. They liked the idea. They were behind it. So it wasn't sort of a kind of a hard sell, if you will.
Yeah, and stepping back similarly, 'cause it's been a pretty easy conversation these days. I would say that, for us, it really was both parties sort of just dialoguing about it early on and us talking about how it's achievable. And really kind of bringing that part of the conversation to the table and talking it through early with clients as to, how we'll get there, and mapping that out with them was really a big part of, I wouldn't say bringing them along necessarily, but really kind of making them feel like, okay, like this is not overly risky. And I do think that it was, the process and then the way it played out. We haven't had a lot of people turning back, like what they do want, and they're like, yep, okay, and they just keep moving forward. So I do think that has, it's the fear factor, it's the unknown seems like it's a bit of the scary part. So really kind of coming up with a plan has been a really big part of just figuring out how to get there.
And are all or most of these projects taking advantage of the Mass Save Passive House Incentive Program?
All of them, yes.
All of them.
Yes, and a lot of them are affordable, so they get the
QAP.
the QAP points as well.
Right.
I'm kind of saying that was also that was a very helpful tool to be able to kind of work through the process. And then at least from the perspective of a smaller firm, where I would say that maybe an owner is a little bit more skeptical of like, okay, well, guys are small. do you really know what you're talking about? So having sort of Mass Save behind me, like, okay, it's not just us, we're sort of jumping on this and we're just, we're trying to be advanced, the design process. I think, that was hugely helpful for us.
Yeah,
Just a follow-up
sure.
question. Now that the conversation has changed and it's code, you're getting owners who maybe don't want to do this. or
Right.
Saying, I have to do this now. So how are you navigating those conversations with them?
That's exactly where my head was. It's funny you said that.
First,
Yeah.
tell them about the Mass Save approach.
But- Yeah, no, it's true. It's funny. For so long, it was, we're just doing this. It's very low key, whatever. And now it's like, do we have to do that? And so, but at the same time, it's like, but we got this, like, why are we worrying about it, right? So I think there's this sort of confidence that I think right now we're in this. Some of us know we can do this, right? It's not that, but we have to really put it out there. And when we fail, right? And I think this gets a lot to like what are we targeting? And what happens if we get so close, but not all the way there? Which has so many layers of concern. CCO of Massachusetts, right? But it's a measure, it's our understanding of what success is. So that's actually something I wanted to kind of move to is how are your teams kind of thinking about milestones and benchmarks along the way? Because it is a long journey and because you can't wait till the end to kind of celebrate and get together and feel good about where you're moving. And it is a bigger team. It's not just the design team, right? It's folks that the owners are bringing into the equation and now the code is bringing the equation. How are you trying to think about success in ways other than certification, I guess?
Yeah, I think, because right, there's the obvious, right? And I do think that the process itself lends itself to quite a few momentary, design certification, midpoint testing in construction, some various things, even feasibility study, like being able to take a look at it in a first pass and evaluate your design and understand how it's doing and even what your initial assumptions are showing up as. And I think that we approach it with a lot of curiosity. So it allows us to be surprised along the way and just kind of excited about it. So I think for us, one thing that we use to measure success, in more of the repeating this process over and over is a goal of not ever making the same mistake twice. So only making mistakes. So that's definitely one way we measure it.
Yeah.
But I do think for us, it comes down to, looking forward to the different energy models and the iterations and really understanding how, kind of, again, we do have a process that we've been able to evolve with each project in which we map things out and really have a clear understanding. And so I think it's in part of kind of like to continue the metaphor of just focusing on the next step versus, trying the end and looking at the summit the entire time. You're sort of paying closer attention to what's right in front of you and sort of just feeling the success in progress.
Mhm.
I'm gonna take that too. I think we're sort of still in the process of trying to figure a lot of this out. I mean, just to figure out what that means, but I think one thing that it's sort of, I don't know if it's a little tangential, but I think it makes me think about some of the, the embodied carbon idea too. And so we don't have the process completely mapped out, but I think what the hope is that we start to move the needle, like, now that we've sort of have this needle of passive house and, we're feeling confident that we can design them. I think a lot of folks here have done that. And then, you know, yeah, there is a challenge to build it, but I think we sort of, the success in many ways now is to challenge us to move the needle a little bit forward and say, you know, we've all sort of, I guess, resorted to some details, but I have a whole bunch of foam and so forth because just couldn't figure it out. But like, you start thinking about, okay, what can we do to sort of, you know, take these pieces out of our buildings? Because, I mean, I think no, we don't like them and it's kind of a last resort, but we're still using them quite a bit. So, anyway, that's kind of what I'm thinking that our success could be is sort of just taking it to the next level.
Well, it's funny you say that because I think one of the things I noticed that I wouldn't have anticipated 20 years ago is how much advocacy has become just part of my life,
Mhm.
whether it's I need a better window, right? That's not a problem anymore, right? Or we need a better system that, you know, and how we sort of meet one another and talk about what we need, right? What are we missing? The air barrier technology, the insulation products, the way the industry has sort of exploded to support the work we're doing.
Mhm.
And, you know, toward that end, it feels easier and easier again, right? On the new construction side. Is it possible I could tiptoe a little bit into existing buildings and how that might be playing into your work? Is that happening for you guys at all?
No.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Not yet. Well, I mean, we've been doing some work in sort of, well, they're not towards passive house, but it's
Right.
definitely, we're starting to see that the work where it's sort of upgrading buildings that are not that old, 20 years old. And, you know, earlier and so forth, it's like, okay, what are we gonna do? And so it's funny enough that this project it started more of us, architectural upgrades or kitchens and so forth. And then they evolved into mostly, you know, mechanical upgrade. And funny enough, I found it just super exciting. I was like, yeah.
Yes.
Because the kitchen, I was like, okay, fine, but this became sort of a, you know, it's like, oh.
Now
we're
the
doing
envelope
something
is,
exciting.
it's right, yeah.
So now we're really doing something. So, yeah, so I think there's a little bit of that. It's still pretty new,
Mhm.
I would say so. But there's there's some pretty interesting conversations about, you know, how to upgrade the systems and electrification, how to sort of bring that to the table, but it's also seems to, because of, you know, budget constraints, it doesn't, at least so far, it hasn't been like, just do it all at once. So it's it's a little bit of master planning, it seems like. It's like, okay, step one, we're gonna take care of we're gonna bring in an ERV and we're gonna actually get rid of all the gas stoves and then bring in some fresh air. Yeah, great win. I mean, I think everyone's happy about that. Then step two, electrification and all these pieces and so.
Exactly.
So that, I mean, to me, that's a really exciting part of what may be kind of coming our way, but may not look really cool in an image, but it's really sort of definitely exciting.
But I think that's so interesting because I do know way more about mechanical and other systems than I ever imagined I would, right? And they're critically important to my design work. And a new construction project is with refrigerants and everything else. We can get into that, and, you know, has its own complexities, and existing building project has its others, but the systems are so fundamental to the design, right? To the overall design. Are they central? Are they not? So I'm curious how that might be playing into your overall, you know, thinking and conversation, just or overall awareness, like the fact that you said the unfluid system is exciting. I wasn't thinking that in grad school. For sure. You know, I was definitely not intrigued by systems. So are you feeling like that is there's a more holistic understanding and interest in that on the architectural side?
I think so, yes, for sure. I think that the example that I go to is when you think about different types of housing products, you think about, you know, rental versus home ownership. And we asked many times, what does that mean? And I think there's an answer to that on just purely architectural terms, what it means to come into your home and, you know, put your code and away and so forth, but also at least, I don't know if it's, you know, I've been thinking about it in terms of what it means to this, from the systems perspective too, because when I think about a homeownership project, I feel like, you know, it wants to be home, so it seems that the owner should be able to have some autonomy on, or some control, or at least understand part of what's going on. It's not a central, I mean, if we can, and what we've been successfully been pushing for is to have sort of the, say, individual ERVs in the unit. So, there is that sort of the challenge of changing filters and so forth, and and then the hot water was, for instance, we're kind of in the home ownership, we're sort of thinking, okay, well, maybe it can actually be in the unit. So there's a little bit, there's definitely different thinking, and that actually happens sort of very early on, and how you kind of like split these things, but you kind of have to, yeah.
You need to know, each of those has design impacts, right?
Impact, yeah, so we need, yeah, so. Yeah, we can't just go ahead and just go in one direction and then kind of dial it back, so, yeah, we sort of need to be a lot more aware and kind of in contact with what's going on. In the mechanical world, which I also didn't think I was gonna get jazzed up about it, but.
Well, and that sort of takes us toward the later portion of the project where the systems are getting installed. And we need to really be working with the owner and the builder, right, to help make sure that the details are getting executed the way we all intended. And so the commissioning, the verification, all that sort of third party piece of the equation, window testing, et cetera. I feel like has taken on a very different level of priority on projects now than it did a decade ago, right? I wonder if you could talk about how you weave that into your process, but also how you communicate with your owners, right? About what you would recommend, because these aren't always required. This commissioning, this sort of envelope work, this sort of understanding how the building is functioning at the end, that Passive House requires, right?
Yeah, I think, because I do think that's where Passive House gives us a lot of good language to speak to it with just risk and durability. And I think that those are things that are very valid in sort of when an owner plans to continue to occupy the building and maintain it and care for it and the residents, you know, you are able to take the conversation from a today decision and sort of look at it on a long-term basis and see the value in that. And I think that that is a shift that has really come into play with Passive House, because so much of it is about, you know, a little bit longer, bigger picture, more holistic, and seeing that across the board for sure.
Yeah. Are your owners trying to collect data on their buildings? Because I know there's some folks in the room that are very data oriented and use that to help drive, right, change. We're all trying to do the best we can with our buildings, and we're not totally sure how they function sometimes. So how do you have any, are you seeing owners trying to track things?
Not necessarily.
Air quality or?
But, you know, I, not necessarily in that I can bring directly relate to data. I think there has been some, oh, I thought our electric bill was gonna look better.
Well, exactly. That's sort of what I mean,
So,
right?
yeah, so those emails have definitely come, and, and then
Yes.
sort of left, you know, head scratching, but, I mean, I think that's one thing that would be, that would be great to be able to kind of start to collect, and I don't know how, maybe as a group sort of start sharing, because sometimes you feel like you're like, you have this question and you're trying to answer, and you're like, okay, well, I need a little bit more, sort of data or help from somebody else to be like, okay, well, this was to be expected of this, this is what could be happening. But yeah, I don't have a direct sort of,
Yeah, I guess I was asking in part because I love that Passive House gives us a construct to let our owners know that we're going to test some things. We're going to make sure that things are going the way we planned. And at the same time, some things are harder to understand how they're working than others, right? So I've really appreciated that general mindset, the commissioning, and it's now, right, even coming into our conversations, right? The commissioning is a word that owners are familiar with, and we can talk about that. But I think there's still a long journey to go, and I think it gets into sort of some of the next conversations about verification and the bandwidth and sort of the knowledge base for that, because I think that's the other piece, is that we are designers. We're not verifiers, right? We're out on the site and owners are looking for our guidance and wisdom. But it isn't really our role to sort of confirm that everything's going as planned, right? So it's that whole team mindset that I love about it.
And I do think when it comes to the team mindset and working with a verifier too, it's kind of showing up as a partner.
Right.
It's being part of the dialogue about reviewing the details and talking about sequencing with the contractor and making sure that you are also being really flexible and sort of remembering what that detail's intent is to be able to adjust it to be what will actually achieve the results in the end. And so I do think that, that's really part of that success, is just coming in as a partner and people continuing to collaborate through construction.
Mhm.
It's not just a design process.
That's a great point. Yeah.
no, I completely agree. I think I was just gonna say, that I think the difference that I've sort of noticed, and I don't know if this is just personal, but it seems that, I find in myself more in the team with the contractor, or having to sort of really be with them. Just so having to work harder at developing the relationship. Because, it's sort of, maybe it's not so much as like, I want my detail, like, type of sort of argument. Is more like, we kind of have to make this thing work. So, there's always things that change on site and something happened in a different way. So a lot more communication. I have to we seem to be more, sort of having to go to a trailer and look and, communicate with the verifiers and so forth. So there's a lot more communication. It's making CA, a little bit more intense. But it also, I think, it's also making the relationship with the contractor, there's less adversarial in some ways. At least in sort of in our experience thus far, because we just have to figure it out, and we kind of have to be the same team to make it work.
Are you structuring your CAPs differently?
Great.
Not yet, but thinking about it really hard.
SCA has always been a challenging feat to make the argument for it to begin with, and it is only getting harder.
Yeah.
What kind of conversations are you having with your developer owner relative to the cost of construction potential add versus the energy savings they may be looking at down the line? So how much of that is a real discussion with?
It's a real early discussion. I think that one thing that we've made, in the communication is, in setting expectation, is that we do a lot more, and I think this is what we've always tried to do in design, but the pace of things and the expectation has always been a little different. I think this is something that we've been successful at shifting because of Passive House, is doing more thinking at front. So versus starting to draw right away, is there's a lot of thinking and evaluating and talking it through before you really start to document it all, so that you make these decisions and then you start to document it. Because before it was really throw something on a page, get it priced, put something else on the page, get it priced. And now it doesn't quite work that way, because that would cause more iteration if you continue down that path. So now I think that the early evaluation and the early dialogue, and people understand why that added cost is in the building, it doesn't end up being the same conversation at the end. And we'll still have conversations about some trade-offs and little pushes and pulls, but it's not to the same extent that it was before.
Yeah, I also feel like the systems realities that are driven by the code, right? The reality of an ERB in like as a fact on top of, not part of, unless we have the APOCA, is and sort of understanding the space realities of some of these systems is a pretty big driver. Like, are you doing an individual system? And if, you know, for which categories and how much space is that taking up in a unit versus what's the space that you need in some central plant or plants, right? And it's pretty substantial, and it frankly feels like it's growing as we evolve our conversations around hot water, going all electric, and so you almost have to have these conversations right at the get-go, like who's paying for utilities? Who's maintaining, you know, how do you go about maintenance? How many filters are you willing to change? Like, where's the equipment and how are you accessing it? These are first conversation questions practically. It's almost insane.
We're talking, what is our energy code pathway? It has a right proposal, which is really cool.
Right, it's exciting, right? But,
Yeah.
you know, this completely counter to where we started, where I started in my career.
Can you, so something, I work for a developer, something that we continue to struggle with is how to design a performance metric, right? So, a general contractor asked our rater recently, well, what went into calculating the assumed blower door test results? And I said, well, nothing, we just put in a passing number because you have to pass. But you know, did you assume I was going to use aero barrier? Did you assume that this sheetrock was going to go to the underside of the decking, or that this interior sheetrock layer was your air barrier? And like, this is means and methods, right? So we continue to hit this
Yep.
roadblock of means and methods, and it always comes back to how do you design an air infiltration rate? Can any of you speak to kind of best practices? You mentioned adversarial relationships. This to me is the one hiccup, but we continue to butt heads on, and I'm wondering if there's a best practice yet. Lesson learned.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really, I think there are best practices out there, but at least from what I've been seeing, you know, when we talk with our passive house consultants, they're really good at bringing all these things out, you know, like this happened here, this happened there, let's think about these details. But they tend to be a little bit they're outside the norm, I guess, in the sense that it's sort of, oh, it's out of sequence for a typical construction. So that tends to add a lot of, you know, at the beginning when say we put the detail in the set of drawings and it goes out, and it's sort of one of those very easy kind of places where they're like, okay, well, maybe we don't do this detail, we could save X and then we can move on type of thing. So I think to me, that's still sort of, you know, I don't think there's a complete, there's a clear, I mean, there is best practice, but sort of a simple, a silver bullet to that, I don't see it. I don't see it yet. I don't know if you have that.
Yeah, I would say we have a practice
Right.
of what we do currently, and so far, knock on wood, it's been successful. Well, you know, a couple of examples only. But one of the things, and it was actually a consultant that in an early kickoff meeting, calculated out what the air infiltration rate looked like from a surface area. I
Right.
presume they took
That's
the
helpful.
envelope, and it's been a tool that I've continued to use. They took the envelope area, multiplied it by the leakage amount, and they said you have an 18-inch by 18-inch square foot that you could, of worth of holes in the building that you can afford. So from designers, we take that and we go, okay, there's tolerance in construction, like we can't spend that all in the design. So we'd actually use that as a conversation. So the previous example where we have a bunch of balconies on the unit, you know, we have a lot of. And so there's a lot of conversation about the doors, because a door is actually one of the biggest areas of leakage that you're designing into your building. We have other clients who, as part of the design standard, use slider door. So like we were able to talk about using only a single slider as opposed to multiple sliders in the building because of just like looking at, double hung windows on their side as a big area of leakage. So we kind of talked through some of the decisions based on sort of this idea of this allowance of leakage and that we can't spend it all in design. And so that's part of the conversation and the complication of the details. And because it's really where it's not the surface, it's where things join. So we really kind of look at that and use that as a way to just talk it through and then try to, design out some of those complications.
Yeah, if I may tie that to sort of the early point, because I completely agree. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that goes to the early, when you're making all these decisions early on and, balconies, I mean, that when I hear balconies, I always get a little scared. It's like, how are we gonna do this? And, there's just this endless amount of questions. But sort of just thinking about through this thing, all these questions through, at the beginning, it's really quite sort of, in my mind, sets the project up for success. If you sort of just assume that you're gonna figure it out later, I think that's when you get in trouble and you see, you kind of get caught in this wheel and you spin and spin and sometimes you get out, but it's not as certain as if you're thinking about all this. And once you've done it a few times, you sort of, we know what the pressure points are. And so we want to make sure that we don't fall in those traps again. So we don't want to commit the same mistake twice.
Yeah, it's become a little bit of a mantra where it's, design the hardest detail first.
Mhm.
And so like, don't like historically our favorite thing to do is leave it to the end.
Right, exactly. Oh, God.
I'll deal with that later. We start with a window trail, which is like, how many times have we drawn a window detail? So one of the things that we really are flipping is kind of like, okay, let's start with the hardest stuff because it really informs the decisions that make the easy stuff even easier. And now that designers are starting to see that working, it's become very easy. But it goes back to that. It's like, you've gotta deal with the hard stuff. You gotta identify, just kind of talk it through, like, what is all the gunk we gotta get through and how do we get through it together?
Right, and I guess I would say all of that comes back to craft, right? We're not builders. We're not building the building. So in my view, we are designing an airtight building. It won't be airtight, but that's what we have to work toward as designers. We know there will be leaks. So there's no place in our continuous line, right? That we can't know is gonna leak, right? We have to identify, I see discontinuity there. That will be a weak point. We can, and I actually think that's part of the fun. Like, okay, this is a puzzle. There is a shell. There are pinch points. This is a tricky detail. And if we have the builder at the table early, anytime we can, so that because I don't know what the best way to do the detail is, and I don't even know what order the detail might need to go in, like which trade has to come in first, especially if we're talking about the foundation to, or at the roof, or so drawing something out, give it a try and get some input and be a little humble. Like, this is not what we know, but what I do know is this line has to be continuous and these have to be continuous. And if we can always be clear about our intent and to own our intent, always, then it becomes means and methods. Okay, I'm not gonna require an airtightness. Past is gonna require that, right? I'm gonna call out my envelope.
I think you nailed it, because with the intent, it's like, then you can talk about how to achieve that intent. Like, if you didn't quite nail it in the detail,
Right.
with how to achieve it, that at least everyone knows what the goal is.
Right, and no one's gonna say, oh, I had no idea,
Yeah.
Right?
So do you typically have a CPHC or CPHD as an independent consultant, and are they employed by you or by the developer?
Hopefully both. Well, then they might be employed.
Either
by
way,
it, Either way,
either
it kind of, it just depends. And so a lot of times that is a owner decision. We are seeing, we like to own the energy model because of iteration. And so, and then with the CPHC, it kind of depends on, is that the same person as the energy model? Is it not? What is the owner, like, what is their typical approach? Sometimes they have a typical approach. So we're very flexible on that. Our CPHC has always been third party, but we have staff in-house that are trained. And so it just gives that extra layer, like you have more minds thinking about it too.
Yeah, I like that model. I mean, I started with, someone next to me that was doing the Wolfie Andrews. It was just a lot, there was a lot more fluidity in the design process. Currently, that's not the case. We're mostly, we're subcontracting that out. And then as much as we can to have the owner sort of be looking at that, just because of the, it seems like there's also a clear continuity if you have a passive house consultant, if they do verification too, so that to me is sort of it's a cleaner path, and then we're working with a team that is sort of along the way, those are involved along the way. So I'm advocating for that process at this point.
And are you doing both FIAS and fee projects, or have you only done one or the other?
Mostly FIAS, and in my previous life, we did a fee project, but I think at this point it's just must have been FIAS.
It's been all FIAS for us. We have studied both on a few buildings, and then sometimes the consultant that's hired only does one. So that sometimes that's what actually drives the decision. We don't have the opportunity to explore both options. And that's kind of where I think the existing building conversation comes in a little bit more too. That tends to be one that we would look at multiple pathways there.
Yeah, we've only done FIAS so far for new construction. And coming back to your CPHC kind of third party question, we're totally flexible. We have loved the Mass Save program and its incentive for that initial feasibility study. And while we have a number of CPHCs on staff who can do that work, do the modeling in general, we have kind of held it to that feasibility phase, which we like, because often we're laying down and massing buildings for zoning way before we have an engineer that's actually in the weeds with us. So we are trying to understand a little bit about form and massing and volume and, all of that with some assumptions clearly about systems. But it's nice to have that ability early.
We were talking earlier about your owners mitigating risk, whether it's budget or timeframes and things of that nature. Does that translate to you in your kind of conceptual stages and schematics? Or do you kind of feel like you could still be open-minded and work on those things with the end goal in mind?
You mean, do we feel the risk? Is that what you're asking? There is no risk in what we do. I think we feel the risk a little bit, right? We're kind of testing waters, right? We're testing waters. It's a little uncharted.
Do you feel like you've reeled it back a little bit in terms of creativity and conceptualization of,
I don't think this layer has inhibited our creativity, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
If anything, I actually think it has encouraged us to understand why you would make a different choice on a different facade or for a different reason, and make the creativity more intentional.
I agree with that. The detailing is definitely more intentional because you wanna, it's like, okay, that's good, like you have to really think so much about every single detail. We should have been doing it all along, but now we have somebody, holding us accountable. And so you actually start to think about like where you spend your creative energy. And so you become very intentional with the decisions that how you're detailing a building and where you're adding that extra layer of thoughtfulness.
I love the idea of not making
the same mistake twice. So can you each tell us one mistake you never want to make again? Cause we're gonna get leapfrog over the mistake.
I'll go first, and this is a coordination mistake. I bet a lot of them are. We had a design in mind where it was podium, cold, open garage below, warm building above. And the idea was that all of the plumbing, the most of the plumbing would be above the podium in an insulation layer. Which I could have sworn was communicated at every level through pre-install meetings, etc. And only after install was I like looking at the underside of the deck at the garage level going, what is that unbelievable maze of PVC piping that I'm seeing coming through what is happening? And I just went a little bit nutso, and I had someone bring over the drawings, and looking at. God damn, they did not do anything beforehand, and now it's through the slab over and over again, and that is heat traced, and yeah. So there you have it. Like, we all thought through it, and somehow in translation, still, and it's permanent. Like no one's going back to change that, right?
And your fix, I know you.
It's heat traced forever.
Yeah, no, but like in anticipating not doing that again, like I know you use the 3-week look ahead a lot and like. I don't know, is there any-
Pre-installation meetings, to me,
Okay.
pre-installation meetings are so valuable, and I find the trades love them too, like to talk, the ability to have a moment to talk through what they do, what they bring to the table and when. So I do think with GCs, if we talked through that, like out, with the right team, for them, would have been good. We didn't.
Mentally, I'm a little bit
Yeah.
stuck on that. So like, we're,
It's painful, right?
well, I'm in the thick of one issue right now, and it doesn't, I'm not sure I would actually tomorrow or, once we saw what consider it a mistake.
Fair.
But so we have an all continuous installation assembly. And pre-design passive house, and then, Walden Construction get a note that it doesn't meet the Energy Star requirements. And it's interesting. So it's like, it's a really, I'm like, we're having this trouble swallowing that pill because it doesn't feel like a mistake. Like it feels like we were going for an approach that simplifies things, it uses fewer materials and really kind of, for me, the simple solution is the most beautiful. So I'm so conflicted with that. And I know a P project that did the same approach and is having no issues. So
which requirement is not meeting?
the Energy Star.
Really?
Yeah, and so that's where we're still in the thick of solving for that one, but like for me, that one is like, we've actually hit so many snags along the way with that assembly that we've had to like. Just make the argument for it each step of the way, which is interesting, because I'm like, we're not the first people to build an all CI assembly, all continuous installation, so. For me, that one is like, we're gonna learn a lot from this one, that's for sure, and kind of
Mhm.
figure out how to make our way through that one next time differently and not make that same mistake
Right.
again, or at least just have a
Lessons
better
learned,
sense
even if
of
it's
what's
not
coming.
mistakes,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time about thinking something specific. I mean, I think there's definitely been, I guess, more sort of, thermal break issues that they could have picked it up, but we didn't, and that sort of is now in my mind sort of makes me think more about sort of simple. Let's try to be simple, have simple solutions, still really, awesome, cool looking buildings, but let's sort of simplify. But yeah, no specific way, and then, balconies and sort of, I think sort of, I guess that's where my head went, is just the endless discussions about, okay, how we're gonna deal with this threshold issue, and you know, the balconies are a great idea and it make great space, but it definitely I've made.
Yeah, a lot of
Every-
complicated,
yeah.
yeah.
Complicated, so I'm sort of just, you know, you end up just. Did we really need this? At some point you start questioning, did we really need this? But I think at the end it's gonna make sense, but, you know.
You know, I think actually an interesting comment though on our process that I think has changed because so much is panelized when it's wood. Is that if there are transitions, heaven forbid, that might not just be on the exterior wall, but might cross between panels, right? You really have to think about how things are landing and when and how products are gonna carry through in that sequence. It's not, you know, in every, and I think it's exciting for the builder, frankly, to be engaged in that conversation. It's exciting for the team to be like, hey, did you notice detail on blah, blah, blah? Can we talk through that? I'm not sure if we drew it right. Just, I think people really enjoy explaining their own process, and I find that almost every project I'm learning that just because we used to do it this way all the time or did it that way, like that means so little, right?
Mhm.
It's doesn't matter how we used to do it. And so I really appreciate just being humble and letting the folks on site teach me every day.
I did just think of, now that I got the one out of the way, I thought of one more that I'll be quick on. So I think that the timing in which we submit it for our first round of review. So I think that's probably one that everyone who's done it once is like, let's do it earlier next time. So we try to get through at least 2 rounds of review before going out to bid. If not, have design certification at least before construction starts. Is like,
So most of the baseline detailing is sort of established and you feel like you're not making big changes.
yeah, so we detail our entire envelope at the beginning of CDs and
Right.
we work our way inside. And it does create this nice order to things of how we really do, you know, similar to what we're doing with our MEP systems now too. Start from the outside, work your way in.
Diane. I just want to follow up on your first big mistake. I mean, issue. I'm sorry, issue. So,
Go down the history. Diane.
so we've advocated for continuous insulation only, especially when you have steel studs. So, are you saying that you can pass the Wolfe modeling and the passive house criteria with only continuous insulation, then you get to the Energy Star checklist or something, and the checklist is prescriptive? Is that what's going
It's
on?
based, so the checklist seems, and like I said, we're in the thick of it, so I'm still protesting that I think that I'm
You're
gonna make this work.
You're gonna, I'm confident.
You've already bought the paper clothes there, Barry. So, you know, the way that Energy Star is looking right now is that it works similar to code, where you either have the prescriptive method or you have the UA method. And so because we can get such an efficient envelope with such little insulation, it doesn't calculate it out as an effective or R value. It's just the inverse of an R. So you don't actually get all of the performance value out of those decisions in that very remedial calculator. And so it's just not proving it. And so it doesn't hit the values on paper, but when you do a model, it hits the values.
Some things are insulation.
It's 3 inches barrel wall. Well,
So it sounds like you're being punished for a good deed.
that's how it feels today. Thank you for validating that.
Michelle, sorry, can I just jump in and just clarify for those listening as well? FIAS requires Energy Star certification as part of the program, which is where this comes up.
Yes.
You mentioned you had a similar PHI project that
We
did.
didn't, so I don't, I like.
Oh,
part
you
of
know
me-
of one.
Yeah, so part of me is like, wow, how did it work over there?
So you know of one, which that's because the PHI, that they don't require Energy Star through their process. So that's one of the differences there.
Right. I saw Bijan in the back. I just wanted.
Wondering what percentage of your projects fail to get certification at the end? And what are the main 2 causes, if so happens?
Bijan, really? I didn't call on you. Hey, did you have? I don't think percentage is the relevant metric at the moment because it's such early days for what's even gotten built, but it's hard. It's the blower door, in my experience, and it's the tricky transition spaces that are not associated with continuous exterior assembly. So that can be a lot of things for a lot of buildings, carved out spaces of any variety. But transitions are challenging, and often those spaces aren't able to be finished in a continuous way or in a way that's easily evaluated because of sequence and all kinds of other who gets in when and timing. But it's a small percentage of the overall square footage.
Well, he left the door open for me.
Yeah.
We have 0% failure rate because we're 1 for 1. So.
Yeah.
Need a few more to the sample before I can answer that question.
Ramp one, it wasn't during construction, it was, we were pretty close, before certification and, there was, everything involved to make us, put us over the hump. It didn't really pan out for the owner.
That was after feasibility,
After
before
feasibility.
construction.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so we off-ramped, but we kept everything, I mean, we kept all the, the high performance windows, so we, for the most part, we still felt good about it because, we're still delivering a pretty good building and much better than, typical buildings, so. And it's a hard pill to swallow.
But was that miscalculation or misinspection or mistesting?
No,
of that,
it was,
or what was
it was during design, so it wasn't really at the testing.
design?
You off-ramped a little bit
Okay.
sooner, yeah.
We
Yeah,
just didn't know we were just gonna make it. Forget exactly what one of the levels.
How often do you run into a window to wall ratio question with developers?
a lot, a lot, especially with not just developers, cities, planning boards. Planning boards have a lot to say, right, about elevations.
Planning boards want bigger windows or all glass?
Oh, yes, they do. They want more glazing, more rich looking facades, right? I mean, yeah,
Interesting.
even in Cambridge, even in Boston, right? It's not, they want it, right?
Yeah.
And they want also,
Yeah, I
That's
think
the
at the
end.
beginning, that was one of the first questions is like, okay, but can I have windows? Or like, how the windows
Right.
going to be, and, a drawing doesn't really do it justice. It's really hard to be like, well, look at this. So we had to bring owners into buildings and say, hey, look at this. It still is pretty.
You can still see out.
You can still, yeah, exactly, and still, plenty of light coming in.
Yeah.
We'll be okay, and, okay with it.
Going back to, your project in going through right now. In hindsight, would you say that you would start to look at prescriptive CI as opposed to overall energy rating so that you do hit the R value right up front and knowing that you're gonna hit that rather than at the end guesswork, I guess, well, the prescriptive code, you probably would have possibly.
Yeah, I mean, I
come up
think
short.
it was a 9th edition building, so we actually surpassed prescriptive code. We ran a comm check on the building and we were over 20% above code. So, I think that even today, it would still be beyond code. And so that's really where the challenge is it's kind of this funky thing with this one way of calculating it. So there's that's kind of where, like I said, we had to already make the argument to the building inspector that this passed code and we made that argument because they weren't familiar with the system. And so we've been running into this issue. And so for me, it's more been a pain point in my house. Kind of like balconies.
But I think like, it's funny, I mean, every owner's question right now is how are we gonna meet code, right? How are we meeting code?
Yeah.
And I think that I have never, ever once seen a project choose the prescriptive path. Never. Getting old now. Because it's like not sensible for the projects of this scale, right? They're just, performance makes so much sense. What are we trying to achieve holistically? And so I haven't seen it pan out cost wise. I haven't. So I hope that what would happen is Energy Star will realize there's a disconnect and we'll all play kindly together, right? Not that we'll start doing backflips. to
You
do
can
something
just go
silly.
over to the Energy Star office and talk to them.
Yeah, exactly. That's lots.
I'm wondering if you're seeing greater delays from particularly Theus in different parts of certification, and whether that's happening at the front or the back end, or whether they haven't gotten hit yet because we don't have the volume that we're anticipating, the hockey stick that we're anticipating.
I haven't noticed significant changes yet, but
Okay.
I'm assuming it's.
Is it bad?
But
I mean,
Are
if you
the
know what
delays
you're
bad?
getting into, then what it just is, right? So I don't
Okay,
feel like it's,
yeah.
I don't feel like there's been a big shift in any major way. I feel like they're on it. We understand the timelines. The
Mhm.
first round takes a few months, the
Right.
second round takes another,
Yeah.
you know, it's just sort of,
Changed.
Okay.
Right.
right?
No, I haven't seen much change, and I think our CPHCs have done a really great job of communicating to us what to expect, and as long as you plan for it,
Right.
it's not a problem. I actually think that where we've seen the logjam is actually more locally,
Yes.
Is what?
locally.
Locally.
And like, especially verifiers are maxed out because that's such a
Yeah.
long process. So we have so many in the pipeline and it's actually takes longer to get it out of construction than out of design. So there's
Yes.
sort of a backs up there. So I think that, that's really where we've seen it. So that could be a delay from it hitting BS as well, is that we're actually slowing things down before it even gets to BS.
Have you seen, you've done more than one Pass West project, you guys, but have you gotten to work with the same contractor yet? And seen a return on, because I feel like
No.
most of CA is doing continuing education credits for the contractor. And it would be really great to not have to do that on one, but if that's, how far away is that in my life?
I mean, honestly, we're pretty blessed. Our contractor community, a few years ago, we were so worried about this. They can do this stuff. Like most of them are working on one and will have one under their belt if they don't already soon enough. And it takes one, right, to sort of really process, I think, some of the fundamental sequential issues, communication issues, pull people with fire issues that they need. I think that kind of coming back to what you were saying, Andres, the fact that it's so much more of a partnership is such a good thing. And it brings us back to where we should be. Building is a craft. We do it together. It takes a team. And the contractors who are doing this know that. They know that they need us. And it isn't adversarial because we're in it together. And so I'm not everyone, I don't really mind if everyone is a new contractor if they're motivated.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think even we do a lot of sort of mid-size projects where, contractors may not be sort of established. And so far they seem to be stepping out. They're like, you sort of ask the question and they're like, oh yeah, well, you're trained. And so I think the community is really seeing the writing on the wall and they're like, okay, we have to step up. And yeah, they either have one or in the process of building one. So
Sometimes if they're brand new, you get a little extra mojo, like they're a little extra terrified and they really go to the next screen. Like, you go with that Prosecco products, just cover that facade. You got that. I'm like, that was a good move. Way to go, you know?
And the fear factor, they come with their DNA. Yeah.
So just go with that, you know?
At what point in time are you guys able to pull on the contractor onto the team?
Well, that's a very much an owner question, but the sooner the better from our perspective, I think. I mean, if they can help us, again, sort of coming back to performance, if they can help us evaluate different approaches to the same overall outcome, that's great, but that can't happen at CD, right?
Yeah.
Very easily, so.
Yeah, we
How
kind
receptive are the developers to the idea? They're trading off the idea that they can get documents, they can get 3 bids. And go for the low bid versus coming in with a contract commitment early and getting the advantage of keeping the price down. That's the trade-off. And some believe it, some don't, right?
Yeah, we've had a couple projects go to bid and some that are planning on it too, that we're working in pre-con and have very invested contractors helping us through pre-con. And so I'll be interested to see how that one in particular plays out. And I think that there is such an advantage to, and everyone sort of trusts the number that comes from the player who's been in the game the longest, and how could you not? So I do think that it's a really, you know, where we used to kind of believe that all the numbers were using the same information before. I think that that has shifted a little bit. So I'm curious how much we'll keep going down that route.
On the affordable side, I feel like historically, it didn't seem feasible from my vantage. It felt like developers had to go out to bid maybe a decade ago. And I'm seeing so much more negotiated early.
Yeah, developers don't really have to go out to bid
Right.
under the DHCD QIP rules. But you have to play a bit of a game with them. You have to have an early contractor estimate, say you're gonna get sub bids for everything. It's all kind of a game, but it's a game that allows you to have that negotiation early.
And it also depends on your funding source too. Like if their funding is all public funds, they don't have
Yeah.
cash to put out to bring in GC on, right? In theory.
The GC isn't getting paid.
Yeah, but you're right, a public project would work differently. But whenever we can get builder input early, I think it's an advantage, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I mean, similar to bringing a builder early, just work with them, and then I've seen where then it's still the set goes out to 3 different, these 3 different contractors, and typically the one that was.
Right, hopefully they have
Yeah,
their head in the game.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that's can be dangerous because
It
you
can.
get people who don't have their head in the game and lowball without even knowing what they're doing.
Yeah, well, the market goes, it's funny, contractors go in cycles too. Lately, they seem a little hungrier. I don't know if you're feeling that. People seem to be reaching out like, hey, keep us in mind. And I'm like, okay, I'll pass you along to the owner, but. And then you go through phases where everyone's busy and you kind of really need someone at the table because you're not gonna get the bids. So I think there's other dynamics too.
Earlier is better.
Absolutely.
The contractor could get paid if they don't win the bid. They usually, if
Right.
they were doing the pre-con, they do get paid.
Not when I was a developer.
Not how Hank played the game.
At least that's what I've been seeing more than.
I've seen that too. Think you
So
get a
it's
lot.
theirs to lose and stuff.
And you get a good product from them when they're getting paid. It makes sense.
Yeah.
That you're valuing their time and they're valuing yours, so it works out.
All right, I think are we wrapping?
Yeah, if there's any final thoughts or final questions that you have for the panel, otherwise.
I don't have any pithy summation here. I feel like we've kind of run the gamut. But I appreciate the great questions and it is a journey and I'm excited frankly for the next conversations, the verification side and contractor side, because I think that it's the whole 5-year puzzle. It's less, right?
Right.
Than it is really what it's saying.
Really appreciate it. Join us next month for the engineer's perspective on Passive House. Take care.